Hello, just going to do another short video and tutorial. Um, um, just about some random things. I thought since I did one on Danish, a few Danish phrases and so forth, I'm going to stick sort of with that trend. I'm going to talk about a few things from what I know of like the culture and things in Denmark in general based on my knowledge and research slash my mom is actually very good friends with not just a Danish person, but um, they're they're very close. They have been for many years. They continue to write back and forth. But she visited um, the city which she lived in. I think back then it was Copenhagen. I don't know if she still lives there anymore or if she lives in Aarhus. I can't remember, but my mom talks about her and her what she has to say quite here now and again. So I'm just going to talk about a few things here. One interesting thing about Denmark is that, at least I find it, is actually has the world record for the oldest flag that is still in use today. Um, that flag is the has been in use since supposedly 1219. There's no record of that actually, but there is a record of it being like 1319 or 1396, something like that, and that for sure they do have knowledge of. And even if it wasn't 1219, it would still break the record for being the world's oldest flag in use still today. That is the Danish flag with the white cross. The white cross symbolizes Christianity, like the other Scandinavian countries also have the cross in it. Sweden has a yellow one with a blue background. Denmark has a white one with a red background, and Norway has one a red cross with a blue and white background. So they all represent Christianity. They were all installed by their kings and so forth. Just about the time when Christianity came, and most of it was when actually Lutheranism came to those countries, which came up from Wittenberg. Came up from the heart of the Lutheran Reformation in central eastern, I guess East Central um, Germany back in the 1500s and 1600s. But even before that, there was already Christianizing going on in those countries. So it does hold a world record for the oldest flag. It is also, interestingly, the biking capital of the world. Danes love their bikes, even though today there is a much greater use of automobiles, autos, um, more than there ever used to be. But there still is a lot of bicyclists, and they still, I think, they hold they have one of the greatest numbers of bicyclists in the world. Uh, Next to that might be Holland, a few of the bigger cities in Holland, as well as probably a lot of the countries down in eastern, southern Asia, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, so forth. In those countries, there's bicycling has been big for many years, probably more like 100 years or so. You still go to those countries in Asia, Southern Asia. There's bicyclists all over. It was back then. My dad was there, and it still is today. Same thing it is for Holland and Denmark. Not quite as much as it used to be, but um, they have special roads for bicycles. Um, it's almost like a bicycling highway sort of system. And America, especially New York City and I believe Orlando, Florida, has copied their bicycling um, sort of transit system off of Copenhagen. And there's a verb for that, actually. It's called copenization, which is really odd. I find that kind of weird and funny and odd that you would actually name a verb after a country or a city based on their style of how they get around. So they the Americans here call it copenization, trying to Copenhagenize New York City and some of the bigger cities, so it's much easier for bicyclists to get around. Okay, move on to the next one here. Hans Christian Andersen, a very, very famous writer, a fictional writer of stories, most of which are sort of apply or appeal to younger audiences like children and so forth. He is by far still today, one of the most famous children's authors, such as The Little Mermaid, The Ugly Duckling, and several others. You can go to Denmark, and there's a lot of different things. You can see Hans Christian Andersen's home and a lot of the other things. There's a statue in Copenhagen. Actually, it's in Copenhagen, just right off of the shore. And there's a big statue of the Little Mermaid. It's for in tribute of Hans Christian Andersen's story that really became famous, and Disney made it not just into a story, but they made it into a movie. The other stories are actually very popular as well, but most of them are made into plays and like skits and so forth. There's been no major movie yet, at least that I know of like The Ugly Duckling and The Emperor's New Clothes. So that's that. Legos. It's by far, I think it still is the world's biggest and most selling toy in the world, or toy system. Legos. It's still a Danish company. They owned, and most of it is actually manufactured still in Scandinavia, but they make parts all over the world: Germany, Eastern Europe, Russia, and so forth, as well as the Asian and American countries. They do a very good job of marketing their product. So they sell worldwide, and they're by far the biggest seller of toys, or their toy system, Legos. They actually started out with wood, and it was one guy he was a carpenter, and he made little pieces of wood. He'd kind of tinker around and sort of make building blocks, and then he came up with this idea to make a patented like piece of wood with a special grooves that you can put them together with the other pieces of wood, and they'll actually stay together, and then you can also pull them back. So it was like a puzzle for wood in a sense. And then when the time came for, I think right around the war period, when plastics and petroleum products really started to come in, it became a lot easier and cheaper to manufacture such pieces. They used plastics, and that's when it really took off. Then you could have different colors, and it was just a lot easier, a lot faster, and it appealed, I think, to just in general a lot more people. So that's kind of how it started. And Lego actually is comes from two Danish words. I'm trying to remember which ones they were or how they're spelt, but you can Google that. That's online somewhere. You can Google that, and I believe it means to like put together, but I honestly can't say that for sure. One other interesting thing about Denmark is that it's been continuously ranked as one of the happiest countries in the world. It was for a long time number one. It's not anymore. I don't think it is, at least. But it always struck me as kind of odd, like how such a little country in Northern Europe, Scandinavia, can be so happy, and Americans always consider themselves, oh, they're really happy people, and they got everything, and they got things more than any other possible people in the world. Technically, in a sense, you could say we almost have it all, but just because you have a lot of material things doesn't mean you're happy. And that's kind of what struck me as very interesting. When I read about some of these polls and some of the statistics about how they rank which countries are happier than others, as well as talking from my mom and what she knows from her friend. Danish people in general, when they set goals, they don't set very high goals. They're very realistic people who just kind of want to live basic lives. Their lives really revolve around their families and just enjoying life in general. So they don't put certain things like having a second home or just having a lot of money or having 2 cars or something else like that, like a lot of Americans do. Americans like big houses, multiple cars, a lot of luxurious items, which is fine and all, but it really doesn't. It's not going to really make you happier if you're still alone by yourself enjoying those things. They might be fun for a while, but so the family is really the focus, and that's really why I guess they're so happy. Is you know they got their families, and they also have compared to most other countries, they don't work as many hours as a lot of people do, so they're able to spend more time at home with their kids and so forth. And I think that's something that you could actually learn and take in from them. That if we just did a lot less, maybe working and stuff, and just enjoy what we have, we might be better off in a sense. So that's another interesting fact. I think the last one I was going to mention was the architect Jan Utzon. He's a very famous architect, and he's not just famous, and there's not just one architect, but Denmark in general is just notorious and very noticeable. Not noticeable, but they're very. I'm trying to think of what the word is for. They're just noted for their architecture, their buildings. There's a lot of good architects in Denmark. There's a few other countries as well. I think Sweden might be with that. But a lot of the architecture that's in the U.S. and the architecture programs, they're heavily influenced by Danish architecture. And quite a few of the profs actually are or were Danish people, professors. So we do have a lot of influence from the Danes for architecture. They're very notorious for their architecture. And Jan Utzon is probably one of the most notorious. He did a lot of interesting buildings in not just Denmark, but probably one of the most famous is in Sydney, Australia, with the opera house there. The one that looks really weird, but it's actually quite cool. It was built in 1973, and it's right in pretty much downtown Sydney. So those are like the things that really make Denmark stand out. That really put Denmark on the map. So those are what I'm kind of sticking to for now. I think there's a lot of good things you can learn from Denmark. They may be a small country, and a lot of people may not know much about it, but in general, just the way they live and the way they work and so forth. Like for instance, a lot of the careers in Denmark, I guess would fall in with them kind of being a still socialist country, which in America people are like, oh, socialist, that's terrible, and that's just really bad. Nothing good comes out of socialism. In a sense, I guess that is true, but one good thing about I guess their way of doing things and economy-wise is that their careers are they pay pretty much about the same. Meaning you could be a doctor and you could be a garbage man. There's going to be a difference, obviously, but there's not as much of a difference as there is in the U.S. and other I think more Americanized or westernized countries in the world where there's a huge difference between what a doctor makes or a lawyer makes and a garbage man or something like that. Um, it's much more on the same scale there. So, and I think that's good, and a lot of people will say that too in Denmark, is that people will pick their jobs or their careers based on what they actually want to do. I think too much in some of the Western countries, besides like America and Canada, and I think even you could say the same thing for France and Germany, is that they kind of choose what they want to do based on how much money it might make or it might bring me personally, like wealth wise. Um, but that is especially true for Americans. I think everybody wants to become an engineer here, or a doctor or a lawyer because they pay the most and there's the biggest demand. Nobody ever says I want to be a garbage man, but that's definitely not true for Danes how they live their life, and they just like they just want to have a job and they want to enjoy it. I think that's something you could take away from it. So I think that's all I'm gonna do for now. But if you'd like more videos in general, I guess, or maybe you'd like to hear some more phrases, Danish phrases, etc., would be more than willing to and happy to do so. So thank you very much and have a good night.